Welcome to episode 24 of the Marketing Operators Podcast. We have a jam-packed episode today. We have Jared Brody on. He is the Executive Vice President of Marketing at Nectar, and we are talking everyone's favorite topic. We're talking attribution today. So we're talking about custom-built attribution tools. We're talking about the data teams that are used and built to build these custom tools, and we are talking about how these tools are used to make decisions in your day-to-day decision-making process of when you want to spend more, spend less, and how you're forecasting and all that good stuff. So really fun one, super actionable. Thanks as always to our sponsors, Motion, Prescient, and Rich Panel. If you like the episode, make sure to subscribe and share it with some marketer friends.
At Ridge, we are loyal users of motionapp.com. And why is that? It's because creative is the new ad targeting. 4, 5, 6 years ago, you'd show up to Meta, you'd tell them exactly who you wanted to target, and that is no longer the case. If you want to be reaching new audiences, you need to be doing that through creative and a strategic approach to it. So what we talk about on our team all the time is creative diversity. What are the motivators, the reasons to believe, the new content pillars that we're using to reach new audiences? And all of that gets cataloged within Motion so that we can both measure what's working within each of those categories, as well as how do we measure against one another. With all the talk of creative strategy, Motion has become an industry leader in content that my team learns from and your team can learn from too. So you can go to motionapp.com and check out their webinars, subscribe to their newsletter. We've done exclusive Marketing Operators podcasts with their audience to be up to date on cutting edge creative strategy techniques. So if you're ready to join the best D2C and e-commerce brands using Motion to win at Meta, TikTok, Snapchat, go to motionapp.com, tell them the Marketing Operator sent you, and get 50% off your first month.
All right, we're back. We made it happen. This one's a long time coming. Cody, how was the birthday though? You turned 32, right?
Yeah, it was good. It was a week ago. It feels like so much longer. I got to hang out with you guys for a bit, so that was fun. And did the only thing I could do with these crutches, which is went to the movies and then went to a steakhouse. So all good, can't complain.
Good, and recovery's good?
Yeah, feeling good. Got the stitches out today. So not walking yet, but one day soon.
Nice. Well, good thing you're a digital marketer.
Seriously. Could do that
from
a couch.
What day is your birthday, Cody?
It was August 15th.
August 15th. I'm August 21, so we got a couple of Leos.
Well, happy birthday.
I'm July 26th. I'm a Leo as well.
Oh,
but I think I'm significantly older than you guys. So
I'm
what's your birthday,
late
Connor?
November 22nd. So I'm a cusp, a little Scorpio Sagittarius.
Oh, hybrid.
Yeah. You know. Sometimes it falls on Black Friday, so that's exciting.
Except you got to work. Except you got to be on that day.
What better way to celebrate your birthday than like spending a bunch of money on Facebook ads, you know?
I mean, refreshing Shopify like 45 times on your birthday.
Dude, totally.
Yeah, that's a hell of a day. That makes total sense. Well, Jared, we're pumped to have you on. I know that Resident and Nectar are definitely DTC muses for us three. So actually the initial inspo, or the initial way that I got connected to Jared, I think you were listening to one of the early episodes when we were talking about like attribution, conversion lag, and Cody posed the question, something along the lines of, how do you measure long-term conversion of traffic and spend today? And then you and I ended up having some back and forth on it about just talking about like measuring 1-day click to 30-day click kind of growth and using that as a way to sort of project that. So yeah, we're excited to have you on and chat about all things, attribution and like goal setting, decision making, team data, all that fun stuff. Before we get into that, very curious your background. I know that, like I said, we all look at Nectar and Resident as a muse. I know plenty of awesome marketers whose background included working at Resident. People like, Ben Kachavi I've worked with, Sterling Montez are a couple guys that I connect with regularly that I've worked with that all have come out of there. So just overall curious, like who you are, what's your story, and how'd you ultimately get to your role now, which is Executive Vice President of Marketing. Is that right?
Yep. Executive Vice President of Marketing at Resident. I started direct marketing, growth marketing, direct response, whatever you want to call it. I call it make more than you spend. Back in the
novel concept.
Yep. Back in the late 90s. So this is when there were things like switched long distance and local exchange carriers and wallpapers and ringtones. So I've been doing this for a bit of a while, for quite a while. Then switched to brand side and got involved in a few hair care brands, a few skincare brands. Took a detour for about 2 years in the ad tech space. So I was working at Live Intent for 2 years. And then I came back to marketing and am now at Resident. Been here almost 5 years at this point.
Before we go deeper, can we do a brief, like high level overview of Resident and like the brands underneath it?
Yeah, sure. So Resident has 5 brands in the direct to consumer mattress space. Biggest one being Nectar, followed by DreamCloud, Awara Sleep, Siena Sleep, and Cloverlane. And we are primarily DTC online, but we are in thousands of retail stores across the U.S. Not our wholly owned stores, so they're third-party retailers, but probably about 4,000 doors or so. And recently, Resident was just acquired by Ashley Furniture, which was it was great news. Very happy that happened. And we're working with the Ashley team to. It's kind of it's a textbook acquisition. They're very good at production, at supply, probably the best in the world, to be honest with you. And we like to think that we're pretty good marketers. So we are, it's a match made in heaven.
Is that public? Is the all that information around the acquisition public?
Yeah, I mean, most of it's public. Sure. I mean, I don't think.
Are you able to share what the deal terms are not? Okay, that's what I was curious about. Okay, got it.
No.
Is the overall, the connection I always make is with like Meyer cookware. Meyer has, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 cookware brands, each one appealing to, like they have Heston, which is some of the most expensive, nicest cookware that you can buy online or in retail stores. Then they have other cookware where you can get a 12-piece set for $60. Is it a similar play there where you have different products, different price points that are just appealing to different customer segments?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So each one of our brands is targeted towards call it different strata for customer purchasing power. Cloverlane is the most expensive. DreamCloud and Nectar are pretty close in price right now. DreamCloud was in between Nectar and Cloverlane. Awara is an all natural product, so that has a little higher price point. Siena is a lower end with respect to price point.
What's the big differentiator on the brands that are similar price point? Is it like materials? What does that look like?
So a lot of it is look and feel, to be honest with you. But certainly DreamCloud, for example. So DreamCloud and Nectar are the two biggest brands. Nectar is a memory foam mattress first. There is a hybrid line for Nectar as well, and then DreamCloud was the opposite. So DreamCloud was a hybrid mattress first, and then added memory foam to it. So, by the way, stop me if you need to ask questions. I've been way involved in mattresses for 5 years, so it's like second nature to be talking about this stuff. But memory foam mattress is all foam, and a hybrid mattress is foam and inner springs, metal springs.
Yeah. No, I think this is cool. I think it's interesting to hear the strategy and the reason behind having, multiple brands within the same single product space. So it's cool to hear it.
I'd love to hear your quick take on this, Jared, because I think this like multi-brand approach to single product categories is like underappreciated. I've thought about it, and for listeners, I'm like fascinated by Nectar. I've talked about it in previous episodes. I've tweeted about it. I think it is one of Nectar, Resident as a whole co, because I think it's like the purest form of D2C to a certain way. Like Ridge, for instance, like we capture this like high end, it's like relatively high end, $120 AOV. We're like well above what most men typically pay for a wallet. So this idea that you guys can go after a huge category like mattresses, and then capture people at different price points is just like the best way to agnostically capture value in a single product category. So I just find the whole model fascinating. Do you think this model will get more popular over time?
It depends. It depends sort of the acumen that companies have to look at these things and manage these things together. It's complex. There's a lot of moving pieces. As much as we want to keep things separate, everything has to be looked at together. And that takes a certain discipline and a certain understanding of how to do that. One of the key reasons and one of the key benefits to actually having the multi-brand approach is just the real estate you can take up on SERPs, on social platforms, on feeds, on everywhere. So the more we're a zero-sum game. If someone's buying a mattress from me, they're not buying it from someone else. And if someone else is buying a mattress from another brand, they're not buying it from me. And neither one of us are probably going to see those customers for a good 5 to 10 years. So for us, we want to get in front of as many people that are in the market for a mattress take up as much real estate as we can. That's all over the place, every single channel that we can be in. That makes sense.
Awesome.
The ones that we can measure.
And that's what so there's like a ruthlessness to it that I just love so much. Sure. Like I think in the D2C space, like people will kind of romanticize your brand, right? And then it's like, oh yeah, no, we're here to like acquire customers profitably online. And like, honestly, the best way to do that at scale is across multiple brands and multiple price points.
When was Resident founded? How long have you all been around?
2016, 2017, right around there.
20. Okay. So this is a good segue because I wanted to ask you about your role. Like what do you overall oversee at Resident? And I also simultaneously want to ask, like, what do you think has allowed you to, go past brands like Casper? Maybe this is the same answer in two questions.
Sure.
So yeah, what are you responsible for overseeing at Resident? Like what ultimately reports into you?
So I am responsible on the Resident side of the business. I'm responsible for acquisition, for CRM, and for what we call creative operations and optimizations. And the latter one being, it's not the creative director and the creative team don't report to me. We have our own studio. They don't report to me, but I'm responsible for the analysis of the creatives, for some of the ideation and making sure we're getting the velocity of creatives in the formats we need to our channel managers when they need them. So that's half my role. And the other half is building an in-house team to handle the marketing spend for Ashley and taking over from their agency that was managing their spend.
Got it. So within acquisition, is that all things? So that's paid media. Is that influencer?
Yeah. What are like primary
affiliate?
channels? Yeah. Curious kind of channel mix if there's anything interesting in there.
Good question. So I glossed over that. So it is all paid media. Now, of course, we have we drive organic traffic that is managed under our product team. It's much more technical. I know a little bit about SEO and whatnot, but enough the nuts and bolts. But we have people in house that handle that. So it is all paid media that I handle.
And are you like whatever you're able to share in terms of media mix? Is it?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. Well, we're very we always want to like I was mentioning before, we want to find people that are in market for a mattress. So search is very big for us. I know a lot of the people, and I know a lot of DTC companies out there are heavily relying on paid social. We certainly are relying on paid social, but search is definitely our bread and butter between search and shopping with respect to people expressing intent that they are in the market for a mattress. That's exactly who we want to go after. And the good news is everybody sleeps, and I'd say 99.9% of people sleep on a mattress. So we've got a big audience to target or to go after.
I'll personally endorse the quality of Nectar mattresses. I lay my head on one every night. So quality stuff.
So do I. Thank you.
Nice. And what about within CRM? Is that like own media channels primarily that report into you?
Yeah. So it's email and SMS and direct mail. And what that is there's not a huge lifetime value play in our space. Yes, we would like for other people to buy more mattresses. We would like them to buy bedding and frames after they've already bought a mattress. But I'm primarily responsible for driving new customer acquisition. So for CRM, a lot of that is turning the leads that we capture on site via email or phone into customers. And that's primarily what our CRM activities are.
I have a quick question here. Just on the topic of LTV, I watched an interview before this, and you guys were talking about like typically someone doesn't buy a mattress for like 5 to 8 to 10 years, something like that. So there's long cycles in between. You guys might have LTV. It's just you're not old enough to have realized it yet, right? Do you guys have any expectations? People are going to come back at year 6, 7 and give you another $600, $700?
Yeah, we definitely think they will. And they do. They do right now. I mean, there's multi-bedroom houses, multi-bedroom apartments.
Right,
people have second houses. So yes, people do have to come back. Repeat purchases for us. It's a lot more than we had initially thought. It's sub 20%, but it's higher than we had initially thought. So it's happening already. And yes, once we are, a little older in our age as a company, then we do expect to have even more people come back and buy those mattresses and other stuff from bedding and bed frames too.
Totally. We face a similar issue with the wallet business. Guys aren't buying wallets like every 6 months or anything. And ours is guaranteed for life. So there's really like very low LTV. So I've thought about our businesses similarly, only we're getting like $100 versus cost of a mattress is a little more sizable.
I bet you guys that's a good your note of retention channels not really being retention channels, like they're email SMS typically called retention, but I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, I would bet that email SMS probably get more last click acquisition revenue attributed than your search campaigns and your paid social campaigns, probably, right?
on a last click basis for sure.
Yeah.
But we don't attribute any of that to those channels because, no one is walking down the street saying, okay, I'm just going to go buy a Nectar mattress, give my email address and whatnot. So there is media that is spent to drive sales, and in the process of driving those sales, people that aren't ready, they are submitting email addresses, submitting phone numbers. So we will not attribute any transactions on a last click basis or any basis to any of those channels. So even organic or direct. So we try and bring that back up funnel to the initial channel that drove the interest in that path to conversion.
So on that note, and I'm curious, I didn't know that you reached out based on some comments I said. Hopefully I wasn't terribly wrong on them, but if I am, I'm excited to hear. But yeah, what's your measurement stack? Kind of curious. Obviously, I would imagine it's a longer consideration phase, maybe similar to a hex cloud. But like, how do you guys think about, and practically, what do you guys use to measure some of these things?
So we build all of our own tools. We've built our own marketing mix model. We've built our own multi-touch attribution. We've built our own device graph. And everything that we do is done via BigQuery and visualized with Looker. Now, there's a lot in between going from BigQuery to Looker, which is creating those rules and creating those bespoke rules to different platforms and attribution windows and engagements, be it a click, be it a view. So it's all wrapped up into our own internal multi-touch attribution.
So if you're an e-commerce brand and you have .com and distribution channels, Prescient AI's tool is a game changer. They have an industry-first ability to measure proprietary halo effects that can tell you down to the campaign level the impact of all of your ad spend across both your e-commerce store sales and your Amazon store sales. We use MTA tools at HexCloud and we love them. However, MTA tools are not going to tell you the return on ad spend considering your Amazon store. So in reality, you might dial back or turn off a campaign that looks like it's underperforming per your MTA, but if you're including your .com and Amazon sales in your attribution, that actually might be a higher performing. So we've actually used Prescient at HexCloud to confidently scale our CTV and meta channels. And we're also able to validate those top of funnel channels' impact on Amazon by calibrating the model results with a proven incrementality test that we ran through house. So not only is it giving us a great model on its own, but it's also integrating with these other tools. When you think of omni-channel measurement, think of Prescient AI. So we use Prescient at HexCloud. It's used by other top brands like Good American, Symbiotica, Timbuktu, Nude, and dozens more. Prescient AI, helping brands scale spend confidently with AI-powered marketing mix models. If you want to check out Prescient AI's marketing mix modeling tool, go to prescientai.com/operators. That's prescientai.com/operators. Okay, let's go into the why. So we can talk about like why you've built custom versus out of the box. Then we can talk about maybe the data team that makes this all possible, and then we can talk about actual like strategic operations of like how you use MTA, MMM, and whatever else you're using to make decisions.
Sure. So I mentioned all the tools that we've built, and we did that for a reason. What we have found is only you know your business best. And going back years, when we were intent on building our own multi-touch attribution tool, we did contract with a third party it was an engagement to see if it was something that we wanted to continue with. We were working in parallel with them to build something similar and see which would come out better. And the end of a 3-month trial period, which took a lot of work to get everything tagged properly, to make sure the analysis is right, to get all the data transfers and everything. The net outcome of that was your most impactful channel for your business is display. And we said, that's not true. And thank you for the time. And thank you. So we then decided, and we looked at what we built in parallel, and we did not come up with that answer. And if you don't know your business best, you might believe that. But we knew that was not the case. So we choose to build our own tools because, they're bespoke to what we do. Now, that's also can cause some angst and some doubt at times, usually unfounded, because when we talk about the data team, I'll tell you why. But we're an audience of one. So we are using our tools. There are entire companies devoted to creating these tools and these models, which have a lot more resources and a lot more customers. So if something breaks, chances are they're going to know as soon as it breaks, because there'll be dozens of people reaching out to them. If something on our end is not working as well as we want, or it seems like it can be tweaked, or there's some doubts, then we really have to dig and understand if what we're seeing is actually accurate, or if there is something wrong. So it's got its pros and its cons, but there's definitely a lot more pros than cons, in my opinion.
And what were the main differences between some of these out of the box tools that you thought were leading to incorrect conclusions versus your custom built tools that I presume uncovered what your true best top of funnel, intro to brand touch points were? Like, what was the main few differences between those?
Well, so we really focus on what we consider core platforms. A core platform for us is a platform that is always on. We know how to measure, and it drives good results. That is a lot easier to measure for click-based platforms. So a lot of these, attribution tools that are out there, third-party tools, they want all of your data. So they want all of your impression logs, all the impressions. They want to tag everything. And by nature, impressions are very, very greedy, because you're going to get millions of them for very cheap. So if you insert all these impressions into all this data and all these paths to conversion, there's going to be a natural crossover, which is going to attribute some of your transactions, or at least a fractional part of the transactions, to some of those impressions, which are very, very difficult to prove in a typical MTA analysis or MTA model. So with those, we do geo tests, we do holdout tests. We take a look at certain saturation, part of our marketing mix model. So, we self-admittedly, we focus on the things that we know how to measure, but it's served its purpose for us for sure.
Yeah, someone told me once that you guys will really only use channels that provide the data that you can feed into your forms of measurement, whether that's MMM, obviously MTA, everything's going to drive clicks. So just to clarify that point, do you guys feed impressions back now? That's a part of the model?
So we had, and the tools, we eventually realized that for the same reason that a lot of these other tools have issues with measuring impression-based platforms, even with impression logs, we had the same problems.
Sure.
So we were ascribing way too much value to impression-based platforms that we knew were not as impactful to our business. So when we think about attribution, we take our core channels, which are the click-based channels, and then we take non-core channels. Non-core channels could be something that is on seasonally, like leading up to a particular holiday. Or it could be impression-based channels, or basically any test channel. And for those test channels, we basically will do a geo test. So I know you guys are familiar with those, but you have 2 match markets. Our data team will create the baseline for what they would expect, all things being equal. And we do one of 2 things. We will either spend in the test market a new channel, and if we see a lift over the baseline, then we attribute it to that new channel. But you can also cut spend. And if we cut spend and we don't see any dip below the baseline, then we know that it's wasted spend and it's not impactful to the business at all. So we can go one of 2 ways. You can add new channels, you can become more efficient.
And I assume you're setting those holdout tests custom as well, not using like a house or any out of the box tool.
No, we built our own tool to come up with that. Yeah, and in fact, when here's another good example of why we did this. So we were doing a holdout test with a particular platform, and the test, everything was looking good. The results were looking good. And we said, can you just give us your test holdout and the holdout of the holdout group and the test group? And the distribution by geo was very different in those 2 samples. So, it didn't lead to a false read, but we caught it early enough that if we relied on that, it could have been a false read. So that is one reason why we do this stuff internally ourselves.
And then you mentioned core channels are largely click-based. Are you guys also doing geo tests on those and locking in your understanding of how to what multiple would you put on top of click-based results or something like that? Is there a form of calibration for those core ones, or is that really just non-core?
There is calibration. But it's not necessarily with holdouts. Now, that is, a purist could look at that and say, okay, well, you're measuring your core channels. You're going to spend more on the core channels. Do you know if that next dollar in that core channel is more incremental than the first dollar in a new channel? And I would say, no, I don't. But I would also say I don't care. For us, it's worked, and we do it well. But we've had great success with our approach to this. And, we know that as we mature as a brand, we do need to get into some channels that we are not in now, some that are impression-based, very difficult to manage. Very difficult to measure. But also some of those I consider what I deem marketing hygiene, where Take connected TV, for example. Connected TV on a big screen in your living room. You can't click it. Sure, maybe you could scan a QR code or something like that, but you're probably not going to do that. Maybe, I don't know, 10, 15% of people might do that. So when I look at a channel like connected TV, I know it's difficult to measure, and I know I should do a geotest, and we have done geotests with mixed results. But take a sale period. We're coming up on Labor Day right now, so maybe this will air after Labor Day. We're coming up on Labor Day. If someone has been to my website and has not purchased, and we're entering Labor Day, which is a huge holiday for mattress and furniture, I want to show them an ad on their TV in their living room because that's the right thing to do. I don't care if I can't measure it. Like, that is going to, it might re-spark their itch to say, oh yeah, Nectar or DreamCloud is having a sale now. Let me go and buy that mattress over the holiday, because that's what people in the U.S. are conditioned to, buying mattresses and furniture over Memorial Day, President's Day, and Labor Day.
That's an awesome note. I think that's something I'm sure most digital performance marketers have had to kind of get over at some point in their career. Like, you shouldn't not do good marketing just because it's hard to measure. Like, that's kind of the approach we've taken with our influencer now, where we don't see a ton of directly attributable revenue. But I also know that just getting hundreds of millions of impressions across social networks per year is a really smart thing to do. I don't really care that I can't necessarily measure direct response from it. And it's interesting to hear a brand of y'all's size say the same thing, so that's interesting to hear.
And it's also, it's hard to see the forest from the trees sometimes. Like, sometimes you have to take a step back. What did I spend? What's my revenue? What's my cost of sales to gross revenue, which is how we measure it. And it's very rare that we decide to do something that is good marketing, and then something is so out of whack that we attribute it to that quote unquote good thing.
Have there been any, like, since you guys have started looking at things this way and kind of built these tools and, refined these processes, have there been any large adjustments to your media mix? Like, have you learned that, just throwing out there, like, some Google brand search is not incremental, or TV is working, or I don't know if you do direct mail. Have you kind of found anything that, like, supports any of that?
So we have, with respect to YouTube, for example, so that is a largely an impression-based platform. And we did a geo test, I don't know, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, maybe. We had very good results. It was great. It was part of our media mix. And we revalidated it. Well, tried to revalidate it, about a year after the fact, and we came up with very different results. But in a year, we were a very different brand than we were when we tested it. So, that's an instance where we had a solid read. We were very confident in the results, and then we retested it. And it turned out to be a little less incremental than we had wanted and thought initially.
For sure. I think that's a challenge. Like, there's no pure perfect North Star for, like, measurement, and they all have their pros and cons. And definitely, like, a geo test will, even if it is accurate in the moment and it's set up correctly, it doesn't necessarily generalize that over time, different period, different, factors, you might get a different one. So we've retested and got different stuff, and it's sometimes hard to know what to do from there.
Our head of ads, Cam, had a interesting thought on how to handle this idea that every moment in time is different from one another, and that exactly what Jared just said, like, your iROAS on YouTube in May is going to be very different than your iROAS on YouTube in any other month. His idea was to basically, every time we're doing a budget holdout, to also run a budget holdout on Facebook as like Facebook is our best channel. We put most of our budget into it. So at any given moment in time, even though that YouTube iROAS will look different, we always have that context point of, like, should we spend more on our best channel or less, but more in this other channel? So at least always have a comparison to our top channel. I don't know if we'll do it. I think it's an interesting idea to provide some sort of context. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. So that's exactly how we measure everything, to be honest with you. So we measure everything on an index basis. Cause you could look at period over period. You could have a 100 or 200% increase in results period over period, but it still might be the worst performing channel. If you go from, you go from, and this is an example, 1 to 10, you're 10xing your results, but no one wants a platform with a 10 ROAS. A 0.10 ROAS.
Yeah, right.
So everything that we do is indexed, and it's always looking at a particular point in time and saying what platform how are platforms working relative to each other, and that's very important and very key to how we measure. Then within the platforms, that's when we start thinking about within those platforms is using our attribution tools and a sort of a bottoms-up approach, which is, okay, within the platforms that are indexing better, what within those platforms is working on an ad basis. Usually it's the ads that we're indexing versus each other within the platforms, but on a platform-by-platform basis, in theory, you want everything to converge to a 1. That means that your spend is apportioned properly. Again, going back to the idea that may not be the case for that last increment, for that next dollar. Is it going to be more incremental in your platform that is a 1.1 on your index versus the 0.8? But it's a bit art and a bit science. I'm sure you guys deal with the same stuff every single day.
It's most of what this podcast is us like slowly trying to figure out the systems that you're describing. You guys have it resident. I just to like double click on that point, because that's exactly how it was described to me a couple years ago, and it was by a former Nectar employee. So I think I just kind of heard it down the grapevine. But this idea of like MMM being or geolift studies being kind of top-down forms of measurement. Like, hey, let's try to understand the quote-unquote like total impact of this channel, and then using MTA as that bottom-up. What within that channel can you like further lean into is at least what we've tried to recreate, and I think helps kind of, that distinction makes it a little bit more actionable. I think like at least brands of our size or smaller, or people who are just trying to figure it out, it can be easy to get lost in like all these different forms of readings, when in reality, there's at least that distinction alone has been very helpful for us.
Yeah. And you mentioned MMM. MMM is by definition, it's stale the day it's created, because it's backwards looking. So for us, it's a line that you start at, and then you adjust accordingly. Like when we take a look at spend, twice a week or once a week, at a minimum, we will take a look at how those platforms are indexing versus each other, and then take a look at the percent that spend is above or below the MMM prescribed percent. And that is how we manage some of those channels. There can be weeks where I would say, okay, if our Facebook budget, if our Meta budget says for MMM, it should be X percent, I may talk to my channel manager, say, well, it's indexing great, so let's go 50% above that. So it's just a place to start. And I think a lot of people get hung up on that, to be honest with you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, 100%. I've said that. I said that last year, where like we put in all this effort. You're like doing geotest in theory, right? You're doing geotests, you're calibrating the model, you're doing forecasting, you're getting to like a recommended budget, and then that first day, you're like, Facebook's way better than we expected. Let's put all the money there, and it's like, oh man. But I mean, in reality, and like for Ridge, for instance, like we're running, 2.5, 3x MER, $140 million plus business. The absolute best thing we could do is put in all that work, and there's like clear paths to optimal budgets being multiple 7 figures of savings. So it's something that I've like been obsessing over the last year and a half, because I think from a marketing perspective, it's where I can contribute best to the bottom line.
So I've had brands reach out to me before that are saying, hey, we're 7-figure brand, we're low 8-figure brand. Like, we don't think we have enough revenue or profit yet to invest in like a geo holdout tool. We don't have enough resource to build it custom. Your approach of indexing, like before we had MMM and before we had geo holdouts, we were just doing that with MTA. Like, hey, Twitter's a great example. Where we launched Twitter, we knew it was a similar stage of the funnel, both social channels, both top of funnel. Our net new visit rate confirmed that. So when we were trying to decide, is Twitter a high performing channel for us, we were basically saying, well, we know Facebook's our best top of funnel paid social channel. We also know that although it's a fraction of the budget, our 1-day click on Twitter right now is actually a little bit better than Facebook. So this is a channel worth scaling and investing into. And I think any brand, whether you're looking at MTA, whether you're looking at GA4 last click, whether you're looking at post, whatever you're using, I think that idea of indexing is valid no matter what kind of revenue threshold or channel mix you're at to warrant different layers of your attribution stack. So I think that concept's really valid no matter what.
Yeah, and it changes at any given point in time. Certain platforms can perform differently. I think we started to talk about maturation a little before. There's certain times of the year where certain platforms mature more or less than others. Ads mature more or less than others. It's very important to understand the set of data you're looking at too. Like, you never want to index brand and prospecting together. Of course, brand is going to look great. Go spend more on brand. Okay, sure. It's as important. Process and structure is as important as the marketing and the work. And you mentioned that earlier. When people think about marketing, it's, let's go sit around the table. We'll have a drink or two. We'll come up with the next greatest idea. What music are we going to have? Who's the artist that we're going to use? But unless you actually know how to measure it, and if you know how to market within the marketing operations and how to test, with things like cold start and learning phase and all that type of stuff, you might have the best product on earth, but if you don't understand how to actually market it and how to look at those results, then you're just going to be hurting yourself.
That's what I'm telling my boss Jason and our founder Danny every single day. Well, we got a great product, Connor. It should be easy.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Always classic debate. So curious. I know you listened to it, but how do you think about, kind of two-part question, filling that funnel, like especially for something like, you guys, like you said, everybody's primed to buy Labor Day. How do you think about, media mix and spend levels leading up to that? And then, how do you know whether you are kind of according to plan? If you've, do you have any leading indicators that you like to look at to see, are you going to realize all that value that you are expecting?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'll take the first part first, which I guess is logical. So leading up to a holiday like Labor Day, spend will not be as efficient as you want it to be, because there will be demand. So you will see searches. There will be traffic. So people will click on your ads. There won't be as many sales as you want because people are conditioned to wait for the sale itself. So 3 days prior to Labor Day, for example, you might have, you might be spending inefficiently at that given point in time. But then if you take a look post Labor Day and right size that based on the results of the holiday, that will then come in line usually. So what we do is we look at every holiday every year and say, okay, and we classify our spend in a couple different categories. It could be, general mattress terms, or it could be bed frames, whatever the case may be. And we'll say this targeting last year or last holiday, 3 weeks before Labor Day, if we can overspend on that and it won't look good, but we know come Labor Day that maturation will come true and it'll look good. So if you're actually backwards looking at that point in time on that index 3 weeks before, where it might have been really poor on the index, after Labor Day, ideally it will be at the index itself. So that's a way that we do that. And the
so
second
most
part,
looking at like historical maturation curves and just saying,
Absolutely.
hey, this year, last time, our MER, whatever you look at, we were under, but we know we made it up. And we know we made it up on these channels.
That's correct. And it's not, and within, it's channel, you should do it more granular than channel level, which I'm sure you would do. But, there are, within search, for example, we know that spending on competitor terms 3 weeks in advance of Labor Day, because quite frankly, a lot of our competitors are on TV and they're generating interest, and we are good at conquesting because we have a very good product at a very good price, a very good value. So we know that that's a target for us 3 weeks in advance of Labor Day. And it might look poor 3 weeks prior to Labor Day, but once we actually hit Labor Day itself, that particular category within search will do very well for us. Now, the second part of that question was, you mentioned benchmarking, I think, or how do you know how you're doing? This is something that for about 3 or 4 weeks before every major holiday and the 2 weeks after it, we are benchmarking every single day. So we are taking a look at, right now we are, 6 days or so from Labor Day. But let's say we were 4 weeks from Labor Day. I know last year how I was 4 weeks from Labor Day relative to how I am this year 4 weeks from Labor Day. And in parallel to that, I know how I did last year. So at 4 weeks from Labor Day last year, if I was over my efficiency metrics by 10, 20%, I can be over my efficiency metrics by 10, 20% this year. Not knowing, but theorizing that as Labor Day hits, that will right size those results and I'll come in exactly where I need to be. Now, in the heat of the moment, you're spending, millions of dollars a day. Not everything goes according to plan, but we have a very good track record of hitting our efficiency goals month in and month out every single year, going back, years at this point.
So does it, totally on the same page. And I think that's how a lot of us are looking at it. Like I've talked to Connor Hexclad, like, they may run their MER, like half of like November, he's told me like half of what their month, November targets are, but they know they're going to make a lot of that back in the end. Like, is it quite that aggressive where you're like, sometimes you're like really inefficient and like really, tossing a ton of money into TV or something like that and just like spiking upper funnel spend? Are you also thinking about like media mix, like more upper funnel spend and then trying to like siphon that into a little bit more like demand capture as you get closer?
So our efficiency doesn't get so out of whack. Like for a couple days in a given week, it could be probably 20% out of whack. But if you look at that with blinders on, you might freak out. If you look at that at the benchmark to the same time last year and you see actually better than the same point last year, then everything is right. Everything is fine. And the channel mix, we've experimented with upper funnel channels heading into holidays like Labor Day, like President's Day, like Memorial Day. Mixed results, particular with TV. We know TV can drive interest. We see it with our brand clicks. We see it with our brand impressions. But if you think about TV specifically, let's say someone purchases a mattress every 5 years or so. So that's 60 months. If you're going to do a 3-week test and everyone in the US is buying a mattress with 60 months, you're not even 1/60 of that in the test, which means you'd have to get damn lucky to hit all the people that are in the market at that point in time for a mattress with your TV ad that will then convert to your brand to actually make that test look successful. So TV has been difficult for us to conquer, just because, I'm not. It's while I say we can be inefficient at times, that's just a harder channel to stomach, because I would know we need to run a test probably a year to actually have a shot at working.
Yeah.
That's not something that we're particularly willing to do at this point in time.
I have another question. So around this idea of like, we're approaching a big holiday. It could be Labor Day. People listening will be preparing for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, things like that. We've talked about it a bit on the pod, but I just want to like dig a little bit deeper into how you guys approach it. We talk about this. We'll start making a larger marketing investment earlier in these periods. Cody and I and Connor as well have talked about like, should we run a holdout test of everything and say like, hey, what is the like true lag on the spend we're deploying November 5th? And like, is it people who are going to convert on November 29th? So that's like one approach we've talked about. One thing that was briefly mentioned earlier was just looking at historical deltas between like a 1-day click and a 30-day click, where you could actually know for certain from last year, like that delta is twice as big in early November than it is in any other time. So I'm curious, like, what are some of those data points you guys use to feel confident in that heavier investment before a sales period?
We are always keyed on how are we doing versus everybody else. So it's your competitive metrics. Assuming there is demand, which there always is prior to holidays, it's how much of that demand are we capturing, based on impression share, based on click share, based on share of voice, things like that. So if we are very under in those categories, then we think there's a problem. But if we are benchmarking where we need to be with respect to those competitive metrics, and we have the highest impression share or very high impression share or click share in shopping ads, for example, for Mattress, then we know that's okay. And we do know that while we may not be hitting plan or efficiency numbers, we are likely getting in front of the people that will down the road turn into customers and likely, ideally, steal market share. I mean, that's what we're always keen on is, okay, you may not be doing as well as you want, but you're doing better than everybody else. And if the answer is yes, then that's all you could really ask for.
So it's all relative. Like you guys are indexing everything. Yeah.
Everything.
Channels, brands. Yeah. The whole thing.
Everything is relative. You're exactly right.
We talk about that a lot more too. And just like a broader like industry point, at least what I've been saying is for a long time, it felt like D2C brands growth were like basically untethered, especially during like COVID, like massive influx in e-com adoption. It was like, it didn't feel like you ever had to worry like, oh, well, am I doing better than competitors? It's like, yeah, you could grow 40, 50, 60% year over year. Whereas now e-commerce penetration's like slowing, or it's like, it's not on like the rapid upswing that it was a couple of years ago. Now what we're talking about internally is like, our CEO will describe it as like actually just seeking alpha. Are we outperforming the average? And you guys are talking about that within the category, which I think is really interesting.
And it's also important to understand the market dynamics too. You can't control things. You can't control for pandemic. You can't control for award. You can't control for influxes in demand or decrease in demand that happen, and they're not explainable. So you can't account for those things. But so long as you are able to know when it's happening and react to it, then that's all you can ask for. We had a real example of this July 4th. So July 4th is a very difficult holiday to measure every year, or forecast every year, because it's on a different day every year. Not different date, but different day. So we had forecasted this July 4th to be a number where actually we started spending. We realized that something was working, whether it was an influx of demand or whether it was just we captured lightning in a bottle. We wound up under forecasting the holiday week itself by about 30%, which is unheard of for our data science team, unheard of. But we knew that was happening real time. So we were able to flex spend to meet that demand because we have the real time tools that we built to actually understand that in a real time environment for multi-touch attribution. If we were a budget-based buyer and we went into a holiday and said, okay, we're going to spend $1 million over this holiday, and once we spend it, our job is done. Well, someone else would have eaten my lunch, and someone else would have taken my customers. But because we flexed up spend to meet demand, we likely took a lot of market share over that holiday. So that's just a concrete example of making sure you're doing better than everybody else.
What are those search term, or those? It was like impression share on your search ads. Is it like brand search queries, and then comparing that to your competitors? Like what are those? What are those like competitor brand KPIs that you're using to index against your competition?
So our competitive framework is threefold. It's taking a look at the market itself, so understanding what demand is. It's understanding share of voice, so actually the media, but not necessarily the results of the media. So who is garnering impressions and garnering clicks, and then on the back end, it is trying to understand other businesses as best as possible with some of the tools that are out there to to understand share of wallet. So all of that is wrapped together in a competitive framework, and then with respect to things like share of voice, is what you were referring to, I think. How are we doing with respect to our share of voice? Is our share of voice increasing or decreasing in this run up to a holiday itself? And some of it may be explainable and some of it may be warranted. But generally, we are usually a couple weeks out of a holiday, we are really keying in on share of voice, because for the same reason I mentioned before, if it's our ads that are getting in front of people, even though they may not be purchasing at that given point in time, because I'm in their heads, because I'm in their browsers, because I'm behind their phone, then hopefully later on they're going to convert to our customers.
And do you use do you use any bigger picture tools like TrackSuite to measure, bigger picture awareness, penetration, market size, stuff like that?
Penetration, we look at tools like just to understand share of wallet. But understanding brand equity is, I can go both ways on that. Like, we are not the most well-known brand, but that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We're focusing on people that are in the market for a mattress. So people that are in the market for a mattress certainly know who we are. But if, I would rather have better deterministic and trackable results of marketing, understanding the impact on my business. How many mattresses am I shipping every single day, as opposed to how many people know my brand? Now, of course, all that spend ladders up to some brand equity, but some of the brands I mentioned before were way more well-known than we are. And even some of them still may be today, but we have much, much better businesses.
Yeah.
Much better business.
That's interesting to hear, because I think all three of us here spend a lot of time and effort focused on generating demand. And what I'm hearing is that you actually don't spend, I mean, you probably do still spend time on that, but you spend much more time and energy and focus on capturing demand, which is interesting. I think that's somewhat different between our three businesses that we're operating in and yours.
It's tricky because, I mean, for us, like I always say, the in-market, there is no in-market audience for wallets. I mean, like, guys get gifted. It's like, with the viral thing on Twitter this week was that no guy ever buys a wallet. They're gifted one and then they use it for 10 years. And that's like, honestly, we've done like consumer surveys, like that's it. So we don't have like we couldn't grow our business to any degree off of search. Like, it's all about going out and generating net new demand. Whereas, mattresses are a little more in-market dependent.
Yeah. And it's going back to that idea. It's a zero-sum game. If someone is searching for a mattress today, yesterday, tomorrow, chances are they're going to buy. If they're in market, they're going to buy within the next couple of days, typically, or at the next holiday. So, part of it is counterintuitive. People might think, and it could be a very long buying cycle, but for us, we are targeting those people that are in market, and there are plenty of them at any given point in time. Let me rephrase it. We are able to forecast our revenue and thus forecast our spend accurately to capture the people that are in market at any given point in time, which is how we key on that stuff.
I want to tell you why Ridge moved our customer support to Rich Panel. Some SaaS providers are jacking up prices for the same piece of software that's barely changed over the years. I think it was Jason Lemkin on a podcast recently said software has gone from being software as a service to software as a ripoff, and I don't think that's ever been more true. And I think Rich Panel is a rare exception to that rule. So we took a demo with Rich Panel, found out they were way ahead of the competition in terms of AI and self-service capabilities. Their support platform is exactly what we needed and what I felt would become more modern tooling for the type of experience we wanted to provide for our customers. So when we found out that they can easily migrate our data and get us up and running in 2 weeks, it was a no-brainer, which is why we migrated, and which is why brands like Thinx, Snow, Lashify, and 2,000 other brands have made the switch. If you are frustrated with random price hikes from your SaaS and want a trusted partner that can help you deliver awesome customer service, head to richpanel.com and book a demo today.
This is what impressed me the most, and what I was like, holy moly, this is wild. So, all right, custom built tools include MTA, media mix modeling tool, incrementality, geo holdout tool. Are those the three? Are there other ones?
Device graph too. We built our own
device graph. Okay, so all built custom internally. Who is building this? Like, what does that team look like? What is how do the marketers in your org work with the data team as well?
So I will preface this by saying I am very, very spoiled. I thought I knew what data-driven marketing was. I would say in the past 5 years, I probably learned more than the prior 20, because we have such a good and robust data team and data practice. So our data practices, our data team has three legs to the stool. You can look at it that way. You've got data scientists who are doing forecasting. Forecasting will drive revenue forecasting, which will drive spend forecasting, which will drive order placing. So we can make sure that we have the right amount of products on hand at a good point in time. Then you have an often overlooked aspect of data, which are the data engineers. They are the workhorses. If you cannot get data from the platforms into the format you want, into your data warehouse so you can analyze it, then you're not going anywhere. So our data engineers are a very, very key part of our organization. And then you have data analysts. So the data analysts are able to use the data that we get into our data platform. And the data analysts are really an extension of my team. So we pair a data analyst with each one of our core channels. So we will have a data analyst that works with our SEM channel managers. We have a data analyst that works with our paid social channel marketers. We'll have a data analyst that works with our affiliate team. And the data analysts are tasked with helping us read results, helping us define tests, helping us come up with new processes, sometimes being the liaison between the platform themselves and us, or on our calls with our marketing partners. They are really integrated into my teams. But we have just an amazing team. It's actually, our data practice is out of Tel Aviv in Israel. So there's a lot of talent there. That's actually where our biggest office is in Tel Aviv. What I've learned from them in the past 5 years has just been amazing.
So they do not report into you. They report it. So just cross-functional. That's interesting. The pod approach is interesting. So basically there's like, I guess, what's your like, how do you organize your channel leads? Like, do you have like a director of paid media, or like how does that work? Are they like, is that who's paired up with like a data analyst?
It depends. I mean, so we have some of our platforms that we have that we spend more money on. We can have a director and then 2 direct reports to that is usually the max. But we're a very flat organization in general. Everybody has hands on keyboard, which I know all of you are as well. But we will have the data analysts work with whoever. I mean, they could work with other channel managers for other platforms that they're responsible for. But there's no boundaries with respect to who our data analysts can work with in the organization. It could be the channel managers themselves. It could be the director. It could be myself. It could be anybody. We're a very data-centric org. And what we also like to try and do is really get our channel managers and anybody who wants access to all the data they can handle and anything they can do with it. I mentioned before, we use Looker as our data visualization tool. Very, very powerful. It's not the easiest thing to learn. I'm pretty good at it because I've just been doing it for, I don't know, 8 years or so at this point. So I've actually built a lot of the dashboards that my teams use, but I will absolutely carve out time for anybody on my team and anybody in our org that really wants to try and get something built within Looker so that they can. I love seeing the light bulb go off in their head when they say, wait, you just built this and I can press this button and it saves me 5 hours a day of spreadsheet work. How did you do that? Can you walk me through that again?
Yeah.
I love when that light bulb goes off. So while we are a very, very data-centric organization, we do try to make sure everybody has a bent towards data and is intent on using it.
So what does that look like operationally between the marketers and the data analysts? So a marketer has an idea, they want to test something, they want to learn something, and it's going to happen through their channel. So like from that moment in time, what's the collaboration between that person and the data analyst to make sure the test gets built out correctly, it gets analyzed correctly, those findings become memorialized? Like, I'm very curious about the operations around that.
So I would look at that 2 ways. One is core channel, and one are some of the test channels I mentioned. So a core channel, those are, those are channels that we're already on and we're already delivering results. So it could be testing an optimization, a different optimization within paid social. It could be testing a different tactic within within search or shopping, and those are a little more easier to do. Just to make sure that the premise is sound and that we read the results properly. I mean, that's basically how that pretty much works. With respect to bigger tests and harder to measure channels like impression-based channels, we have a very regimented structure with respect to how we approach those. We need to go into a test with a measurement plan. We need to go into the test understanding what success is, understanding what failure is. Because if you don't come out of a test, even if it's a failure, if you come out of a test saying, I don't know, that's a problem. Then that whole entire thing was a waste. Now, you won't always get a deterministic read on a test, which is really where an analyst really comes into play, and even some of our data scientists as well. Sometimes they're not so clear cut. So what's the statistical significance on a test? If it's not what you want it to be, what are the patterns in that test? If you can't understand that, then look at some of the underlying metrics, like the brand impressions, the brand clicks, and the overall business as a whole. So it really depends on what we are trying to do, but our teams work together in a variety of ways.
I love that. I'm always telling my team this. I'm like, before we even start producing any asset that's going to go into this test, how are we building the test? Like, what's the testing methodology? And exactly what you said. What is success and what is failure? That was like the most frustrating thing to me in my agency days, where you'd run 100 tests over the course of 6 months and you might get conclusive results on 10 of them. And most of the time, the reason was because the test was set up in a way that didn't make sense. And even still, at sometimes retroactively, I'll be like, oh shoot, like I didn't think of this, but that we should have included this component of this test, and it would have given us some better, more clear results. Like literally offer test we're doing right now. I'm like, oh shoot, like I'm kind of kicking myself because I didn't set up a certain part of it the right way. But I think that is such an important takeaway from all that information you just shared.
And one of the things, and sometimes, we talked about it before, sometimes you're so in the weeds, it's just hard to think about these things or look at these things. I credit my old boss for this approach, which was, we built a quadrant, 2 axes, an x-axis and a y-axis. One is the CPM and on one is the demand. You never want to be in the axis that is high CPM and low demand. So part of that is planning. And if you're in that quadrant that is red, don't do the test.
Yep, totally. What's the size of your data team? How many bodies do you have in that Tel Aviv office? Are we talking 10, 30?
No, we got dozens. Yeah.
Dang.
Dozens. Yeah, I told you I'm spoiled. Like, I'm lucky. I'm totally
and who's
lucky.
that leader? What's that like? Who's that person?
So we have a chief data officer. He is a brilliant guy. Understands data, understands process, understands the impact on data can have on a company itself. He leads the whole thing, and he's an amazing guy. I've learned a ton from him.
Is that guy gonna go eat all these SaaS founders lunch one day? These attribution.
I hope he does it. I hope he does it, because then he's not working for us.
Yeah. Cut that out, Sophie. We don't want to give him any ideas.
I'm sure he's well sought after.
That's awesome. Might have to do another one to go in the creative stuff.
Well, it's up to you guys.
I think we can go quick. Yeah, I'm curious, kind of like Jared, like I said, how you guys split it up. I think it was interesting what you're talking about before. So like what that looks like, how you built the creative team, what they do, and how you run it.
Oh, this is worth mentioning, actually. One thing I didn't mention that we built was a creative analysis tool, which was, similar to, I know what you guys use as a sponsor of your podcast. So we took a look at something like that, and we realized that all of it really was just parsing out a bunch of data and then rolling it up at a dimension level to understand how each of those elements are doing across your millions of dollars of spend, as opposed to your one ad and an A/B test. So that's another thing that we built, and that's really, really important for our business. In general, what you want to have enough budget to generate on a test, in theory, to generate 10 to 20 conversions or so per ad. That's not realistic when your AOV is $1,000 to $2,000. It's a ton of money to test, and you can't do that. So we do, we have a crazy naming convention for our ads. The data comes in, we will parse it out, and then we'll roll it up at the dimension level and understand things like, how is the color of a room doing across all of our spend? This is what are the beats per minute in the music? How is that doing across all of the video ads? One thing that was really cool early on that we discovered was we tested mattresses and the way that they face. in a shot, in an image ad. So you will see all of our mattresses 90% of the time facing forward as opposed to facing quarter left or quarter right. Well, that's because when we tested this, the mattress facing forward is what worked across all of the ads. Even though in that, you could get fooled by that because you could do an A/B test and you might have one ad where the mattress facing quarter left or quarter right outperform the one facing forward. But when you roll all of that data up across all of your ad spend, then you get a more deterministic result. So sorry for the segue there.
Do you have to retroactively change all your ad? Like, so with that specific test, presuming you already had a bunch of ads with mattresses turning in different directions, do you have to retroactively go?
Yeah. I mean, it's a go forward. Like, it's all, and that's exactly what we talk about: creative optimizations and operations. So that's the optimization part. When I have that learning, that gets translated to our different agencies that work with, our in-house studio and our creative director, and say, hey, if we're doing a shot for mattresses, make it center facing.
Got it. So all new ads moving forward, you're like, hey, we're going to start testing this. So all new ads moving forward, we're going to include this part of the naming convention that is, left, center, right.
Yeah. And we test things like, sorry, not test, but we track things like when was the creative delivered? Not when it launched, because you also want to look at what we want to look at is the lag between when my team gets something and when it gets launched, because then you're trying to understand your backlog. And what's the point if you have dozens of ads in a backlog? Like if your spread between when you're testing and when you got to creative is 2 months, something's wrong somewhere. You got to right size that, because then you're just wasting time and wasting money generating ads that aren't going to be used 2 months down the road. And at that point in time, who knows if they're going to work or not, based on the creative optimizations that, like one of the ones I just mentioned.
I think you're totally on the money in terms of like being able to consolidate all those learnings, because there's so many algorithmic factors that you can't just like launch one ad with captions and not and be like, oh, I can confidently say that captions works or captions doesn't work. And you've got to test more holistically, like you said, and like over much larger amounts of spend. So totally agree with that. That's a great point for anyone listening.
Yep. And in terms of how we overall think of creative, it's a combination of quality and quantity. And there's various different types of creatives, what we deem our creative flywheel. So it could be highly produced studio ads. They have a place. There could be static ads, just images. Could be 3D renders. It could be, influencer or UGC. And, when you think about where not everybody's in the same layer or level of the funnel at any given point in time. If I am interested, if I'm a soccer player and I see an ad for a mattress that has a soccer player in it, maybe I'm not interested in a mattress at the point in time, but I may resonate with that person that's in that video. So maybe at least I am, maybe even subconsciously getting, Nectar into the head of that particular person. That's someone that might not even be in the market for a mattress. Conversely, if I am in the market for a mattress, all I would need to show at that person at any given point in time could be a simple static ad that says Nectar now 50% off. So all of those have a place in the creative mix at any given point in time, because you don't really know. Even it's much harder to know now who is at what stages of the funnel. So we try to have all those creatives in market at any point in time. And this is a stat, which is a crazy stat, but we try to produce 20 ads per week per brand. That's a lot of ads. Now, I'm sure you guys do it similarly. Now, not everything needs to be net new. It could be a version of an ad that is performing and is starting to get creative fatigue. And that's just as valid as having a net new in terms of, as part of those 20 per brand per week.
Does that include variants?
The 20 includes variants. Yep. Mm-hmm. And it could include statics. I mean, you could pump out dozens of statics at a given point in time.
Right.
You may not want to test dozens at any given point in time, but it's highly produced studio ads take longer. Static and 3D renders in particular don't take nearly as long.
Now, what's the process and team like? Because you've done the really hard things like building data science internally, building all of these tools. Like that's hard. So I would imagine you've probably done some similar stuff with like a creative studio and that team. So would love to hear what that looks like.
Well, we have our own studio. You can imagine building a set for mattresses. You don't want to be doing that every week. So we have a studio out in California where we have pre-designed sets, and it enables us to shoot in studio. Now that's the team that is headed by our creative director. So that he doesn't report to me, but that's some of that feedback that I would give to that creative director and say, hey, it looks like our dark room is working great, so paint the walls dark. But we have our internal studio. We work with some agencies, and on my team, we have someone who goes out and finds influencers themselves and writes their own briefs and gets the shot list, and then we get that creative in house and turn it into what we want. And like you guys know, you get whitelisted with whoever that creator is or whoever gave us the content itself, and everything has a mix. No one's gonna. I don't want to show someone an ad that says Nectar is the greatest mattress. Yay! If it's from Nectar, everyone's going to say, of course, Nectar's going to say that. So, so that's why there's also whitelisting is part of the process as well when we deliver mattresses, bed frames to creators.
Are you big on having like a tight feedback loop with that creative team, especially like iterating and showing that performance data? Do you have any like tips for like that process?
I think the biggest tip is understanding when you actually can have something that's predictive of the future. Like you don't want to go make a wholesale decision. Like I was talking about the color of a room, for example, go paint the room blue. And then, 3 months down the road, you say, oh shit, all the blue ads are doing, I need to do that. All the 3 ads are doing terrible. All the dark rooms are doing terrible. So yeah, I think the key is really understanding when you have enough results for it to be predictive of the future.
A volume game more than anything, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's volume of transactions. Like the same thing on any given, we're coming up to Labor Day. We're looking at spend and results every single hour, twice an hour, pretty much for the 4 days. I don't want to make a decision and say, let's go spend more on this particular campaign if it has 1 transaction. If it had 0, it would look awful. If it had 2, it would look absolutely amazing. That's only the difference of 1 transaction in either direction. So it's really understanding, again, like zooming out. Yes, this ROAS looks amazing, but in the context, it's 1 transaction. That could be 0, it could be 1. I mean, it could be 2.
So all the creative producers are not on your team. They report in. What's that? The leader of that part of the org? What's their title?
So there is a creative director who heads that up. But within my org, there are creative people on the creative team that sit on my org that are coming up with briefs, that are coming up with designs, that are actually editing the ads. And they work very, very closely with our channel managers for that feedback loop. Very closely.
How big is that team?
Yeah.
With my team in general?
Yeah, like the people writing the briefs. Are there editors? I'd love to hear a little bit more about them.
So for the resident side of the business that I'm working on, my overall team is about 14, and on that team there's 3 or so that are working on creative directly. And then there's someone who is, handles the operations of that and the ad, called the ad ops. Well, it's actually probably 4 or 5 actually, now that I think about it. So one person's job is making sure creators are named properly so that we can make sure that when that data is parsed out, then we are getting the expected results that we want. And the good thing there is we have exception reports when something pops up that's not expected, because all you have to do is go change the name of the platform and then it updates retroactively. So that's not a terrible issue to deal with. For the Ashley side of the business that I'm managing right now, it's currently a team of 2 right now for the creative piece. There's a total of they sit within a total of 9 on that side of the business. So
Connor, do you hear that? He's got 1 person just dedicated to naming conventions. How does that make you feel?
Dude, we joke all the time. You know what I'm realizing, guys, is I told Jared before the call, but I've worked with like some Nectar people and former Nectar people over the last couple of years, and I'm realizing everything I've done has created like a semblance of what Nectar is. Like I'm having flashbacks. The first time I was like, oh man, naming conventions are super important. And Jared, I joke, I say that the heart and soul of any brand like lies in its naming convention.
Yeah.
That you can like everything you want to get contained is right there, and I got that from Nectar. So yeah, a lot of this podcast can be attributed to your work.
I'm very proud.
So Jared, I want to just confirm, do you have does the brand team, the creative team, do they have editors, designers within that org that service your team? Or is it are all those editors? Okay. But then you also have some inside of your org.
Yep.
So there's a little bit of both.
Correct. Yep.
Got it.
Also use some agencies too.
Yep. Got it. And is it just like depends on any given moment in time and what's needed on who, like whether you're using the brand teams, designers, your designers, agencies, whatever you need in time?
I mean, everything is, every group has their own team. When we get something from studio, it'll be done from the creative director with his editors. That will come to us. We call that, version 1 or version alpha. But then subsequent revisions to that, my team can do. And it's usually more efficient because our studio is tasked with doing a lot of stuff. It's not just ads. It shoots for the website. It's packaging. It's marketing materials for retailers. So once we get that first one, then my team takes it over and we are making the revisions to those ads.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. All right, test of the week. Jared's got a good one.
Yeah. So I alluded earlier how we had a different read from the incrementality test that we did on YouTube that was different from our initial test. So again, we are very, very comfortable measuring traffic that gets to our website and understanding where that click to the website fits into the path to conversion. So one thing that we've been focusing on is how do you drive more clicks from YouTube? So doing things like shortening the window for engagement views that YouTube could use for attribution. We used to have our own YouTube account, so now we market YouTube within some of our search and shopping accounts, so the data different attribution doesn't, so YouTube can't steal everything. Formatting, 9:16 and YouTube Shorts that drive more clicks than 16:9 on the desktop, things like that. So we've done a pretty good job of working within the constraints of YouTube or within the parameters to, I think, drive traffic to our site and drive clicks. And when we go back to indexing and understanding how YouTube is doing as part of, relative to other platforms, in the past couple of months, we are finally able to really look at that on par with measurement to some of these other click-based platforms. And that's very difficult to do with YouTube usually.
I have a question on this. YouTube seems like, from an ad placement perspective, or the inventory they have available, it almost feels like many different channels at this point. Like you have in-stream, you have non-skippable, you have YouTube Shorts now, which is super similar to a Snapchat or a TikTok. Are you guys breaking those out, or are you thinking of using those placements collectively, or maybe just focusing on one?
We've tried a few different things. I mean, we generally lump them together. With certain things, we do want to get segmented, and that's very swimming against the stream at times, especially now with Advantage Plus Shopping and PMax and everything that everybody says, all the platforms say, put everything in one campaign, we'll take care of it. We go the opposite. We get very, very segmented in search, very, very segmented in shopping. But with YouTube, because we really want to rely on clicks and statistical significance and understanding and amassing enough transactions so that the platform can optimize appropriately, for YouTube, we actually lump everything together for the most part.
And was there one of those changes that made the biggest difference? Was it like the optimization settings? Did that make the big changes? Were there creative ones? Because curious.
I think one of the big ones was changing the window that YouTube can attribute conversions to for the engagements, to shorten that window.
Totally makes sense. I mean, most people run like click-based, optimization in Meta for that reason only, so they're not optimizing for views. So that also makes sense for YouTube. Yeah, definitely got to try that.
One last question. I had this question earlier. I think it ties in decently enough now. But you guys having core channels that are click-based, that's how you want to focus on measurement. You look at do you guys ultimately expect to see similar results between like a YouTube or a TikTok or a Snap versus a Meta, or do you guys see significantly different click-based results and then like adjust for it accordingly?
So we do things with Meta that enable us to understand the value of an impression as well. So it's not always an apples to apples comparison, because we don't do some of the things with some of the other platforms, but the way that we usually benchmark something like TikTok, for example, largely similar to Meta for the most part, kind of. So we will not always, but we will usually take a look at TikTok and say, okay, in this particular period, what % of Facebook spend should TikTok be? So it's not necessarily looking at TikTok indexing against all of the platforms, but it's understanding the TikTok results that we're getting indicate at this current point in time that TikTok should be 10% of Facebook spend, 20% of Facebook spend, whatever it should be. It's that's the benefit of building your own tools. You can come up with good or bad rules like that. We think it's a good rule.
Totally. Banger episode.
Yeah. I feel like there was even more we had in here that we didn't even necessarily get to. Like I felt like we could probably spend an hour talking about like the actual day-to-day operations of how you triangulate between the tools to make decisions, and even probably deeper into the benchmark setting process and tooling. So
all good.
Yeah, maybe a V2 round 2 coming.
And we'll just say again, Jared, thank you so much for coming on. Really super stoked to have you. And like I said, I've taken a lot of inspo from Nectar, so I appreciate all the hard work, and getting to talk about it today was super fun.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I reached out to Connor because I was listening to your episodes. The first one that came out, I listened to every single one, and you guys know your shit. Like I was listening to it and saying, oh wow, these dudes, they know what they're talking about. So
Appreciate
it was impressive.
that.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. Cody, maybe we'll have to go to a Jet game sometime.
For
Get
sure.
season tickets.
For sure.
For better or worse.
Let's do it.
Aaron Rodgers, baby, let's go. It's his year.
Yes, this is our year.
I'm
Don't
a
say it,
Packers
don't say
fan. I'm a Packers fan, so
Oh, you're a Packers fan? Okay.
yeah.
But yeah, it was a pleasure, guys. Any questions, you can always reach out.
All right, that's a wrap on episode 24. Jared, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for sharing all that knowledge. That was super insightful. I had a lot of fun on this one. Thank you to the sponsors, Motion, Prescient, and Rich Panel. And again, if you're liking the episode, if you're liking the podcast, make sure to subscribe, like, and share with your buddies.